If you've ever bought a pair of speakers or headphones and did any research at all, chances are you probably asked at least one question. How good is the bass? It's almost instinctive. Bass in our music gives it presence, power, and the rhythm that we dance along or bob our heads to. In fact, scientific studies on audio quality have found that bass, just on its own, account for about 30% of how much you'll like a pair of headphones or speakers. But what you may not know is when it comes to speakers, you can actually get more bass without spending a single dollar. But there is a little bit of a catch. Hey everyone, I'm Ian from Tone Hi-Fi. I build handcrafted, high-quality speakers right here in the USA, but we're not talking about my speakers today. We're talking about speakers in general. Really any device that pumps sound out into a room. I think that a lot of people think about speakers a lot like a screen. You basically put it down in a room or somewhere, and it pretty much performs the same, regardless of what kind of situation it's in. But in reality, sound doesn't just come out of a device and flow into your ear holes. It actually moves around, bounces off of nearby surfaces, and interacts in all sorts of different ways. And we can actually exploit some of those properties in order to give your music more bass, regardless of what speakers you have right now. In order to show you how that actually works, I made this. I know this looks like the creation of a madman. I took this random Bluetooth speaker and strapped it to a selfie stick, attached it to my phone with an app that measures sound waves, and then put a GoPro on the top before I forgot that my phone has a screen recorder on it. And then I also broke out my old phone because the app that records sound doesn't allow you to play sound at the same time for some reason. So in short, I'm using my phone to analyze the sound of the speaker, and it's being kept at the same distance from each other so that I'm able to isolate changes in sound to changes in an environment. I could play music with this setup to show how the sound changes, but music is not great for testing. Some songs have a lot of bass, some have very little, and music is always getting quiet and loud, so it makes results very inconsistent. Instead, I've decided to use a test frequency. You may have heard of white noise before. A lot of people use this to help them fall asleep or even to block out sounds in an environment. And I'm going to use something similar called brown noise. Brown noise is like white noise, except for it has more bass or low frequency. Since that's all we're really trying to test today, I can just cut out the unnecessary frequencies and it'll make the results a little bit more clear. In order to do this somewhat scientifically, I'm going to put on my Mythbusters hat and take a control test. The best way to test a speaker without having any acoustic interaction around it is by using an anechoic chamber. But those cost several hundreds of thousands of dollars, so the second best way to do this is by touching grass. Going outside will eliminate any nearby obstacles that will interact with sound, so I'm going to do that for free instead. Technically speaking, the selfie stick, my hand, and even my body are changing the sound due to reflections, but since these are pretty consistent through all the tests, the biggest variable is going to be the environment and what it's close to. So this is our control test. In other words, this is what the speaker sounds like when there's nothing else around it that's interacting with it. Next, I headed inside to see what difference 4 walls makes to this setup. I start out in a pretty large room and repeat the test. You can see that there are some changes, but the results look pretty similar to what we saw outside. There's a little bit more bass and a little bit more volume overall because there's reflection happening around the 4 walls, but this isn't a big difference. But what if we repeat the test in a smaller room, like here in my office? This room is less than half the size of that larger room I did the last test in, and when we repeat it here, you can see that there's a bigger difference. There is more volume overall, and there is some increase in the bass. Although this is hard to see, the resolution on my phone isn't great. In the larger room, the lower sound waves don't really have enough energy to bounce all the way off the walls and then reflect back with additional power. In a smaller room, they have more of a chance to do that. So if you want more bass, you just have to pack your friends into a smaller room. That's probably not a desirable or sane option unless you're in college, though. I mean, once you graduate, you'll want to find larger and larger spaces until you eventually transcend into living in a massive house completely alone. See, we don't actually need to change the size of the room to see this impact. We just need to change the distance from the speaker to the walls. And when we do that, you start to see even more of an elevation in those low frequencies. That's more bass. The distance between the speaker and the wall will amplify certain parts of the sound or whatever music you're listening to. You can actually fuss around with this and try closer and further distances to see what sounds best to your ear. To get an even bigger boost, you can use two walls, also known as the corner of a room. The second wall gives even more surfaces for those sound waves to reflect off and amplify in their volume. I know that these graphs might be a little bit more difficult to read, but you can see that elevation in the lower end. There's definitely a peak somewhere around 60 hertz there, and below that we were getting basically nothing before, but now up to a wall, you can really see there's a big elevation. I also did a few sound tests of this so you can actually hear the difference for yourself. Now, this is a great way to make any speaker you have play with more bass, and I bet you'd be pretty surprised how much power can be put out by a little pipsqueak speaker like this if you position it properly against a wall. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that there is a catch with doing this. It's not going to damage your speaker or anything, but if you have a proper audio setup like bookshelf speakers, this is not the best way to make them sound good. If you want more bass, you'll probably want to get a subwoofer. Doing this is introducing acoustic issues into your speaker, and if you want to have the most clarity and detail and sense of space, this is not the way to do that. I also really recommend against putting a subwoofer in a corner. You will get more bass, but it's probably going to sound really bloated and bad. If you want to learn more about this and how to set up a great sounding audio system for yourself, hit that subscribe button. And if you're looking to upgrade your audio setup anytime soon, check out my website at tonehifi.com. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm Ian from Tone Hi-Fi, and I will see you soon.